Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Lenders Lounge with Kevin Kim. Today, I have a colleague and someone I'm very proud to call my friend, Jason Gilbert from Armanino. Jason and I have come up together sort of in this industry. We both were, associates, I guess. I was an associate. I don't know what they call it over in CPA world, but in the space.
I'll roll with associate. I'm good
associate.
With
that title. And I think you've been in it a little bit longer than I have. But when I came to the industry, like you were like my counterpart, and we've been working in this space now. How long have you been in this space now? Working in this space?
So I think when I landed at Armanino, it was like 14 years ago. So I've been active or playing some sort of role in the space for the past 14 years. Now it's changed over the past 14 years, but my first project when I landed at Armanino, and Armanino was already involved with the mortgage pools and auditing tax, some light administration or oversight work. That was one of my first projects at Armanino, and it hooked me at that point.
Very cool. Very cool. Because I remember when I joined Rossi, I went to my first event. And actually, it was the first PPM. We needed to audit financial. It was like I couldn't reach Josh, and then they directed me to you, and then here we are. That was for me 8 years ago. So you've been in this industry a little longer than I have. Normally we talk about kind of story of the business, but I kind of want our audience. A lot of our audience are your clients. A lot of us already know Armanino. Kind of want to talk about you, my friend, because want to get to know more about how you came up in the industry and where you cut your teeth before this and all that stuff. I mean, did you just jump in right out of college? There's no CPA school, right? So,
well, no. So you got to. I mean, in order to become a CPA, you got to have a certain amount of accounting credits.
Right.
To meet the prerequisites to even sit for the exam. So I'm actually a finance major. To be honest, and I've told everybody that I work with now, I didn't want to be an accountant. Those classes in school, I would sit in the back of the class and be bored out of my mind.
Right.
All historical, debits and credits, nothing forward looking, everything dealing with the past, and I've snooze fest. And I don't know if that's part of me or, no knock on the professors, but the content's pretty dry. So what are you going to do with it? It's just hard. I love the finance classes, calculating, future cash flows, net present value. That was cool. I was all about the yields and the calculations. So, but when I went to graduate and I was looking at what I aspired to be was a CFO or director of finance or one of those roles, looking at the, job description, they all said they wanted you to be a, X amount of accounting experience, or CPA was preferred on all of them.
Right.
So begrudgingly, I headed down the pathway of, getting my accounting classes taken care of, getting to the point where I could sit for the CPA and get my CPA so I could some point get to a CFO position. Along that pathway, I was working. So I was going to school at night to get my, additional units. And at that point, I needed enough units that I might as well just bolt on 2 extra quarters worth of work to get my MBA. So I just went ahead and trudged forward to get my MBA with the accounting units and the finance units.
Like a master of tax, something like that, tax master.
Not even tax. So I didn't do anything with tax. It was just MBA with focus in accounting.
Okay. That's enough to get this. Yeah, that's enough.
It's enough. It was all I needed. So I was working full time at a car dealership. Found a job. I needed experience. I needed somebody that was willing to get me accounting experience or, back office debits and credit experience. So I landed that job as a part-time employee, morphed into a full-time job, and I was going to school at night, which was crazy. I couldn't imagine doing that now. And realized that the ceiling was right above my head. My hair was already hitting the ceiling at that job. I wasn't going to go anywhere. There was no upside. So I started to apply every place that I could get to, job boards, to the point where I had an Excel spreadsheet to make sure I didn't apply to the same place twice because I couldn't remember. I was sending my resume and applying every day.
When was this?
Like,
when was this? What year was this? Because you and I are the same age, so
it's 2006.
Yeah. I
was applying everywhere.
Yeah.
Didn't have my master's yet, but I was in process and just needed another opportunity to get somewhere where I had like the ceiling was much higher, right? I was capped. So somehow Armanino had a job posting in like Career Builder or something, landed. The HR department called me back and said, "Hey, you want to come in? We're going to, come in for an interview." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I was running so hard at that point between working full time and going to school. Didn't do my research on the firm, what I was coming in to interview for. Just came in blind. They gave me a bookkeeping test, which I guess I did well enough on to get to the second interview process. Came in and interviewed with 2 partners and a manager all at the same time, which if I had done my research and figured out who they were before I came in, I probably would have been a little more nervous. But because I didn't, I wasn't nervous at all. Probably worked to my favor, actually. But, came in, did the interview, and somehow got hired by luck. So fortunate enough to be part of that team at that point. And Armanino was, I think.
So were you on the tax side? Were you already? Was it automatic?
I was the accounting side. I was on the consulting side. I was doing like bookkeeping and software training. So teaching small businesses how to use QuickBooks or whatever program they were. I was teaching them how to use it and do bank recs and all that other stuff, and then doing bookkeeping for some clients. And then it was when I landed there that my first project was, doing accounting for mortgage pools. We're taking the mortgage pool statements that were coming from TMO and putting them into QuickBooks to make financial statements, because there was no P&L side to the statements that were coming out of TMO. So that was the first project I had, and that's what hooked me on the funds, because it was finance. It brought me right back to finance and looking at yields and return to the investors, and I just loved the model. And
that was 2007, 2006.
That was end of 2006.
Oh, nice! Wow. So you were here. You had got your feet wet pre-Dodd-Frank. So when did you join audit then? Because you're just so everyone knows, you're now a partner on the audit team, focusing on the private lending industry, mortgage funds, pools, and the like. That's why we're friends.
Yep.
But if you're doing bookkeeping and accounting, that's a totally different practice.
So I happen to be, because at that point the lead partner for our mortgage pool practice was Josh Navarez. Shout
out to Josh. What's up, homie?
Shout out to Josh, right? Shout out to Josh. He kind of like took me under his wing, right? He was energetic. He had recently become a partner of Armanino, high paced, fast moving.
Right.
I love the energy. So I partnered up with him, and I was working directly with him from the accounting standpoint, doing like accrual schedules and monthly accounting and advisory and distribution calcs, and supporting that side of the business. And he was the one that convinced me, because he'd come up the audit ranks and was an audit partner. And he was like, "Man, you should switch to audit." So he coerced me right into switching from where I was over to the audit side. So after 2 years of being at Armanino, I moved over to audit.
So you started on audit in 2009, 8. Okay, very cool.
At the end of 2008. So right about when
that's when all those things were trending, right?
Everything went crazy, right? So like you were seeing glimpses of it in like the late 2007, early 2008, and then right when I transferred to audit and started auditing the funds, was when everything like
blew up.
The record stopped and everything quit, right? And everything blew up. And I was in the middle of trying to audit funds and, help set valuation, loan loss reserve needs, and everything else.
Oh God.
I walked right into that.
Give me horror stories from that time.
Well, horror stories for sure. Horror stories, like crazy properties and crazy stuff that,
because this is for the audience. This is pre-Dodd-Frank. This is private lending was not what we are today.
Oh,
it's a very different industry.
Yeah. So I mean, even today we're still, to a certain degree, the cowboy industry and, softly regulated. But even before then, it was wildly unregulated. And unfortunately, everything had been so good for so many years, right? So you create a fund, and it's, you take your 2 and 12 and pay the 10, and like clockwork. I mean, they just worked like clockwork. The funds were just churn, no problem, no yield compression. Everything's good.
Yeah.
And then we ran into 2008, and everything went completely the opposite way. And unfortunately, there were a lot of learnings that came from that time period of the way that we structure docs and the way that management takes fees, and a bunch of that stuff that we still have baked into the PPMs and operating agreements today, 12 years later, were from the learnings of that 2-year time period. Of
all the advice that we give right now, it comes from that era.
From those fund managers that were having to live and breathe it. We're like, oh man, we should change that. And
back then, everyone was charging loads. They were charging all kinds of crazy stuff back then.
So, I mean, it's all, you learn from it. So it doesn't happen again. And I think we've come through a lot of learnings from that time period. And that was the birthplace also of when everyone started getting into like the performance fee and the target rate and the split above and beyond. Everyone brought in that hedge fund mix of like a portfolio model, because before everyone just get paid the pro rata, but the fact that it was so hard to raise capital, you had to look invested with the investors, that everyone started coming up with these other models to make sure that everyone could get back to a 8% pref.
Yeah.
And back then, I think the prefs were set at 9.
Damn. 9 pref. Wow. Wow. I mean, we can go for days we can talk about fund terms forever. I mean, the funny part is like, we're going through it kind of now. It's like people are learning their lessons in different ways. And it's kind of interesting to talk about, because I mean, we're both relatively young, and, you got a young family, I got a young family, and, we came out, I came out of law school during the recession, but I was working at a bank before that. So kind of like different perspective, but like, I mean, like seeing where we are today, I mean, can you believe, let's talk about that. So for those of our audience who weren't around back, before the Great Recession, I mean, how different is this industry today, comparatively speaking?
I think the sophistication level that the industry has taken a step forward has come in a hurry.
Well, because back then Wall Street money was still there, right? Everyone says like comments on how like Wall Street money came to our space and blah blah blah. I'm like, that's not really. No, it's always been there.
It's always been there, and I think the 2005 through 2006-07 time period, Wall Street money and all the big banks were coming in and buying people up and consolidating then, because they were chasing yield. So that's not different. That existed then, and there were heavy credit facilities that existed then. That was enough of a burn to get everyone to go away, and short-term memories, right? Always rang true that it went away for a long enough time period. There were, you kind of forget that they were there. It was all there, but I think the understandings and the knowledge from the investor base, it all trickles down, right? Because before, you'd have to be dealing with like the institutional or the heavy IRAs to be dealing with some of the complex due diligence that we deal with today. More and more, I'm seeing our fund managers having to deal with a level of due diligence that used to be institutional only.
Right. Well, you see a resurgence of smaller hedge funds, single family offices, RIA-driven fund of funds coming to our space and investing because they like the yield, they like the security, they like the fact that it's short term and it's a nice hedge to their ETFs and their long hold equities. So you're right. The sophistication has gotten better, but it's still, in a lot of respects, a very fractured industry, right? I mean, that's the thing, right? Because back then, no regulation. This is for our audience, no licensing regulation. Right? This is subprime mortgage. This is subprime mortgage, right? So this is no licensing, no Dodd-Frank, no RESPA. TILA existed, kind of, and literally anyone could be a mortgage banker. Anyone could be a mortgage lender, and you had these massive securitizations going on, and there was no such thing as conventional versus fix and flip versus. But this particular industry of hard money in the context of fast funding, cash available now, was still a thing back then. And so from the product standpoint, there may be different nuances, but it's still the same. And it was still an aggressive, unregulated industry. We're a little more regulated now, but I don't think that much more. So it's not the regulation that's driving the sophistication. So what do you think it is? Is it the fear, right? Is it the fear of another 08? Is it everyone got burned so bad in 08? That's one of the things I always kind of wonder, like, what's the reason for this, level of depth in this examination that they're giving us, a client of ours or something like that,
I think you can sum it up in one name, and I think you know the name. There's one name. I mean, there's one name, and that should be the name for all of it, right? It always goes back to like calling it a Ponzi scheme, but Ponzi's actual scheme was very small, like very small, and it, somehow that carries true for every other, fictitious fund structure that carries forward. But Madoff's name should be the name for everything now, right? Because the volume and the sheer size of it, the number of investors that were there that got,
and their profiles too, and their profiles,
their
sophistication, how smart they were.
The number of sophisticated investors that were involved in that thing got swindled, right? That didn't see it and nobody could find it. Holy smokes, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, you just look at it and go, wow, that's incredible. And I think that reason alone is the reason that everything has stepped up and the due diligence is so much higher because of how big that was.
It's true. And a lot of people forget how deep that scandal went. And I remember I was at the SEC in during law school when all that happened. And I was sitting on conference calls with the DC office, and the New York office. I was just a lowly, clerk, and I'm making notes, but like the amount of files, like physical evidence that they were gathering, it was just mind-boggling. It would fill a warehouse, and the amount of, creativity that goes into something like that. Yeah. We kind of started talking about the industry today, right? So the industry has grown a lot and grown up a lot. Kind of want to know more about you told me you joined Armanino's, basically out of college and jumped into audit 2 years. And now you're a partner. Tell me about the path. Come on, man. There's a storied career. We came up together. I know a lot about it, but we see each other at almost every show. But tell us about that, because there's a lot of things that happened in Armanino over the years, and you guys have grown immensely, and as a company, but also as a vendor and service provider to the industry. So tell us more about that.
Oh man, there's a lot to unpack there.
We got time.
To be honest with you, my pathway to getting to partner at Armanino is solely based off of my involvement in the mortgage funds. I loved them. I was deeply invested. I taught myself the predominant software, the mortgage office. I was our in-house expert. To this day, I'm still the in-house expert.
You're the TMO guy. I know you are.
On the product, because we were getting questions about it, right?
Yeah,
our fund managers were asking, saying, hey, what do I do for this? And how do I do this? And I hated not being able to give an answer. It drove me crazy when I didn't have I could tell them where we needed to get to, but not the buttons to click to get there. And it drove me nuts. So I taught myself the product so that way I could actually give the answers and provide the solution all the way A to Z. My involvement in that and being involved from fund startup, so sitting with you guys and reviewing PPMs and comp structures and modeling all the way through day one launch, first years of a fund being launched, and being very careful with the yields in those first couple of years, because you can't just fully load all the expenses into the fund and kill the yield, because you're going to market that too. So being through all that, seeing the audits and being part of the audit side of setting valuations and deal with loan loss reserves and legacy assets and workouts and that side of it, I just love the model. I'm very passionate about it. I'm still extremely passionate about the space and us moving up into, mortgage REITs and expanding horizons because of the REIT world and what that means from a sophistication level with your investor base. Just saying that you're a REIT, everyone gets like that public REIT mindset, right?
Yeah.
That now you're a public REIT and this is bigger than it's a tax election, right?
Yeah.
Most of us that are on the other side that are working with one now realize that it's a tax election. There's some compliance rules, but it's not that complex, but it adds a perception of complexity to your office and your structure. So us saying that we're working with mortgage REITs and being part of that process is very cool. And I'm very passionate about it. And that passion bled over into us expanding how we work with people and continues to this day. Kevin, you and I were joking around today and for the past couple of weeks, and the fact that, us being engaged in the industry, I'm also very much engaged with our fellow service providers, right? Yeah. So over this past year, given where we're sitting, COVID, lockdown, quarantine, us being in California, it's like a kennel. You're not going anywhere. Right. So I've been reaching out to our competitors, to be honest with you.
I want to know more about that. For the audience to know this. This is not a common practice in the CPA sector. I've never seen this done before, where they cooperate as much. And tell us more about this, because I see this as kind of a co-vendor on a project, right? Like all of a sudden, I see two CPA firms that your firm and another firm, they usually compete for business, but you're both on the file together with us. I'm like, what's going on here? And I was on a phone call with one of your competitors the other day and said they're doing work with you guys on a project. I'm like, this is very cool, right? This is very cool to see. So tell us more about that.
At the end of the day, I look at it this way. If we as service providers, even the same line, us CPAs sit on this side and we sit there and compete with each other, right? Trying to one up each other or basically, one down each other, right? It's not any good for the industry, and it's no good for our fund managers, right? It's not making anybody more successful. It's not making anybody raise more capital. It's not, finding better deals or producing better yields. And we just need to be better for the industry. And the pond's plenty big, right? For all of us in this industry, the pond is plenty big for everyone to play and be successful. Mm-hmm. I would rather be successful with my peers, work together, because there are going to be trade-offs. There are going to be situations where we are the right provider for a fund manager in their setup and their fund and their investor base, and they're going to want to see Armanino. There are chances that in this industry my fellow peers, be it Spio Accountancy or Cohn Resnick, are the right provider and the right solution for that fund manager. Why not work together and make sure that the fund manager that we're working with is the most successful they can be?
Right.
The more successful they are with raising capital and their investors and the happiness of their investors and their borrowers and dealings, and they'll create more funds, right? You get to a certain level that, your investor base and your whales, if you will, are going to ask for a different product. You create another fund, and that's another opportunity. And if we do the right thing, we all benefit from the fact that we're doing the right thing. So I've partnered with our fellow CPA firms to make sure that we're being the best solution for the fund managers. And that may be where we're the tax, and we're recently rolling out a fund administration offering. So it may be that we're the fund and we're the fund administration and the tax offering. It could be that we're the audit and the tax relationship. Could be that we're just the auditor, right? But let's marry up with the fund manager with what they need and provide them the solutions that they need.
Well, that's great. And we encourage that type of kind of collaboration. A lot of folks, in the legal, we have to, because of jurisdictional issues, right? Outside of my practice area, which is basically federal, we on the lending side, we have to work with, local counsel, and we do, right? I mean, Nima and Melissa have built an army of local attorneys we partner with and have referral partners, but I've never seen it on the CPA side. I've always felt that CPA companies try to keep it very, very tight knit, and they don't want to collaborate, or it's a very reticence to collaborate. But definitely commend you for that, and I see it. I see the benefit of it.
I'll be honest. it's not easy, right? It makes you wildly uncomfortable, right? Having these conversations and talking.
But I'm guessing only with folks that you really trust. Like, you know these people, you know them well. You're willing to work with them, right?
I'm starting to, right? We haven't had that relationship in the past. Prior to this year, there's no way, right? We would pick up the phone call and talk about, proposals or who we're working with and who our relationships are, and like full deck and putting everything on the table on what we're doing and what's different, right? Never before, right? So those conversations, especially the initial ones, make you uncomfortable for sure, because you're like, man, should I be saying this? Should I be, letting the cat out of the bag? That's my own IP, and should I be displaying the IP to the greater good? But at the end of the day, it is for the greater good, right? The end solution and what we're trying to do here is to make the industry as a whole more successful. Mm-hmm. And the more funds and fund managers that are successful in the industry, the better off all of us service providers are going to be. So let's help everybody.
Right. Agreed. I mean, we have a responsibility to grow the industry, not just from a service standpoint, but also just to stimulate it to grow even further, right? And I talk about that. So the industry as a whole, private lending has certainly become its own animal, right? This business purpose, short-term, residential focused, type industry that more from hard money lending, and I will consider now private lending. It's certainly become, it's not as large as the non-QM sector, I think, but still giving it a run for its money. It's, where do you, and based on your estimations, how big do you think this space is, and where do you think it can go?
I'm probably the wrong guy to be placing some estimates on this. Pull this going out. I mean, I'd be taking a shot in the dark, and everybody listening to me, it's not even close, or holy smokes, you think he's right? Like, I got to be honest with you, I don't even know. I don't even know. Couldn't even put a number out there, but I know that it's big. And I know that it's growing, and we're getting more and more interest, and interest from parties that I would have never guessed would be playing in the space.
Yeah, I'm shocked every single day to find out that, you're in this space? Yeah. You've invested, and they've been investing all along. Like, it's not just like they've had an allocation in this space all along, and they've loved it. It's just they've been doing it behind the scenes.
I'm getting more and more phone calls from interested parties wanting to know our background, who we're working with, and who we can make intros to, right? Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I love those phone calls. I will accept those phone calls all day, because you know what? That's just adding to the industry.
Right. And talking about growing the industry and where it's going, one of the things that I like to bring up with people who serve the industry is kind of, I've always argued that private lending is a very fractured space, right? And I like that it's fractured. I personally like that it's very fractured. It keeps us nimble, it keeps us unregulated. But, is there such a thing as being too fractured? There's not a lot of advocacy in this space. What do you think about that? Like, have you talked about that before?
I haven't, only because I tend to like that it's undercover.
Right.
The fractured state of the industry means that, you're not dealing with heavy regulatory bodies that hold up growth, hold up ingenuity, and hold up you just being able to do what you want to do as a entrepreneur, your business officer, what have you, right? So I'd rather it not get to the level where, you have heavy regulation sitting over the top of it, because it just slows everything down. And it prohibits the, the early fund manager from getting to where you want to be, because you got to jump through all these hoops. Right?
What I worry about is, like, it may even eliminate the need. Like, I look at the conventional mortgage banking industry, right? And I've been on panels and had meetings and discussions with folks who are like, we want to make this like the conventional market. I'm like, please don't do that. Like, I would hate that if that were to happen, because there's the whole like kind of metaphysical concept. Like, you lose all of that entrepreneurial spirit. Yep. But like, imagine if our industry was like the conventional space with Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, VA, repo lines up the wazoo, takeouts, it's just not. I don't feel like it's conducive, but some people want it, and I've always been against it personally. I think so. I mean, I don't know.
What as soon as you're like that, then what makes us different? We're just another version of that, right? So
right. Well, it's hard money becomes soft money, right? But there's organizations that are shifting in that direction as they grow more and more institutional.
Fine, but there's no. It makes it very hard to find solutions,
right?
For potential issues that are out there when you have to sit in a box, right? So if you end up there and you end up in a box and you can't provide the solutions that our industry provides now, right?
Right.
Our industry right now provides a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, talk about that. In what forms? What's your perspective on it? Because I have mine, but I want to hear your perspective on that. How does our industry serve the greater market and the greater real estate market in your perspective? Because I always kind of it's always good to hear kind of someone like yourself their take on it, because you serve the industry as a whole. We share clients across the country, so
yep. My perspective is that the greater portion of the borrower base wouldn't be able to do or scale up like they do without the industry. If they have to go the conventional route, someone will never get off the ground. And B, some will never get to a point in their size or company growth cycle that they get to conventional. At some point this isn't the cheapest source of funds, right? So as you grow up and you're more established and you can find cheaper source of funds, some end up heading in that direction. But you'll never get the speed. You'll never get the flexibility. You'll never get the solution that you need tomorrow to go move on an investment that you can with this industry. And that's the point. That's the point of the industry. That's why it's here. That's why both sides work. Nobody in our industry is coming at it from an angle of, trying to be opportunistic with the borrower. We're here to lend. We're here to provide an opportunity for that borrower and then get paid back.
Right.
They turn the page, right?
But they're also willing to be, one of the statements that I love hearing on a consult is like, we may not be the cheapest, but we are very relationship oriented. Kind of that's the approach. And that seems to be a constant throughout the space. But there's a force, right? There's a force or a trend in this space to want to standardize. They want to make it cookie cutter, and they want to make it, they want to commoditize it, right? And that scares me.
Commoditizing. I hate the word commoditize because it makes everything the same, and then all we do. I mean, look at California and the amount of competition we have for rates. Right. And the compression that's there, it's not completely commoditized, but it's as commoditized as you're going to get across the 48 continental.
I would agree. I mean, here in New York,
as you want. I don't want more of that. I don't want more of that. And we talk about commoditization all the time at Armanino and trying to keep ahead of being commoditized. Because as soon as you're commoditized, it all comes down to price. There's no differentiation. And there's nothing that's different, right?
And that's the problem for service providers nowadays. Legal and accounting is we're becoming commoditized.
So you got to continue to stay ahead of the curve, change the approach. But if we standardize the industry, there's no way that you can change and be different because you got to fit within that box. So I'm of the mindset that putting in the box stymies innovation, stymies opportunity, and we'll put a big old anchor behind us as an industry and our growth trajectory forward.
Right. I just hope that we don't go that direction as well. But there are some forces out there that want to do that, and I can understand their logic behind it and their motivations. But I think it'll be bad for the industry as a whole.
That's fine. My vote's no. My vote's no.
Agreed. I'll
wave that flag all day long.
Yeah, and just to share my thoughts on it, it's like it's always been to me like if the objective, like one of the objectives is to create, like for me at least, is to, from my perspective, is to create more inventory. Banks are slow. Conventional lenders are slow. I don't care how fast they say they are. They're slow. And as a former banker, I can tell you they are not built to be fast, and nor do they want to be, and nor should they be. Don't
have to be.
Don't have to be. And the only way we're going to get out of have more inventory out there, in residential at least, have more inventory, is by incentivizing the small business investor to go out there, smaller investor to go out there and invest in small amounts of real estate, build properties, sell them. Otherwise, where are we going to go? Master plan is Toll Brothers going to be, is the entire state of California going to be built by Toll Brothers? They'll take forever, and it's not something that they'll do with aging inventory, and it's something that we need. And you have conversion needs, you have aging hotels. There's a lot of creative things that can be done, and if we don't have it, we don't have entrepreneurs and small business owners out there doing this, you're going to end up with a city that looks like Irvine. California, a state that looks like Irvine. And for those of you who don't know Irvine, I get lost in Irvine. I work in Irvine. I get lost in Irvine because everything looks exactly the same. Terracotta roof, beige walls, same drive-throughs. It's the most confusing city you'll ever see because everything looks the same. All the houses look the same. All the buildings look the same. And that's just really Control V, Control C. Exactly. And that doesn't work when you've got, aging inventory houses, older, like my parents' neighborhood. All the houses are built in the 40s and 50s. They're all custom homes. You can't do master plan around that, and so, and I really think you need to stir entrepreneurs are the ones to do it. And so listen, there's a lot of rumblings and bumblings going on right now because of we're in our home, we're in California. For those of you who don't know, Jason's in the Bay Area. I'm in Southern California. We're locked down again with COVID. We just went through this year. You and I are both very optimistic about. We were optimistic during the summer. We did a bunch of talks about that. And I continue to be optimistic. Where are you at right now? What are your thoughts?
Still optimistic. I tend to be overly optimistic.
Yeah, me too.
My mindset just generally always thinks the best, and don't play on like the risk downfall. There's opportunity. Let's go. Right. So, I still think that things at this point, considering the year we're in, right, and everything that's transpired, the industry as a whole, there are some struggles out there, and there are some properties that, holy smokes, what do we do with this, right? We have fund managers that are having to deal with the swatch of their portfolio and look at those properties and go, I don't know what to do with it right now, because under the current situation and the current quarantine and lack of travel, it's hard to put a value on that property.
Right.
Everything else, though, up and to the right, no problems, no hiccups. Everything's performing. Borrowers making payments. Delinquency in the portfolios hasn't significantly increased. Maybe some maturity issues where you're having to extend and they can't find a workout or another solution. But
there hasn't been an instance where you had like a massive blow. I haven't heard of a single episode of a fund being in distress significantly. There are some. It's nothing more than at least standard protocol for most funds, at least.
Right. Yep. So I'm of the mindset that stuff's going to work itself out, but some of it's going to take a lot of time, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, going to take some time to figure out what we do here, how we work them out. When do we get back to standard or semi-new norm operation for some of those properties to where you can put a legit valuation on it and get exit stage left? Who knows when that happens? And unfortunately, that's going to change some investments being made in the future. I think that also leads to some opportunity as well.
Right.
So, those that have a mindset of trying to get into a discounted hospitality deal, there's some opportunity there. Yeah. And I think you could, do some workouts and get into some that are at a, fraction of what they were now.
But we're not going to see like a major NPL boom or anything.
No, like I don't think so either. I think people were preparing for that back in April, and I would have looked at it and gone, man, based on scenario 5, right? If you had like 5 pathways of scenarios back in April where you're like, here's our options and where things could go. Scenario 5 probably would have left you at, back to those 50 cents on the dollar NPL pools or tapes, probably not down to the 25-cent tapes that were from before, but the 50 cent maybe. But nowadays, no. I think people are out there looking for opportunities and looking at thinking that there is something there, but I haven't seen anything to date that is of that discounted value.
Right. Let's talk about kind of something that's really relevant to both of your my practices, these REITs, right? And for those listeners out there who are uninitiated, a lot of the kind of stimulation toward that direction, reason why folks started doing REITs was because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, right? And people have asked me, people who are thinking about doing it have asked me, Kevin, what about this current, this election, right? And this episode may go out a little bit later, so we're recording this in December when the election is not completely finalized yet, but it's almost there. And what about this election, right? And aren't you worried about a repeal to the tax bill, right? And have you given some thought? I'm sure you talked to your clients about that issue.
No, so I think to your point there is that even with your guys' involvement, we've already built into every fund structure that we've developed that has added a REIT component to their house, the ability to unwind it tomorrow. Right? You're not stuck to it. You're not married to it. Although I will tell you, there are certain funds that we work with that we should have launched a REIT well before the economic 20% deduction came in.
Mm-hmm. They would have qualified. And it
would have made their life so much easier by having the REIT in place, right? Yeah. So for those funds that we work with, where it is significantly more effective and efficient for them to have a REIT, with or without the 20% deduction, they will continue to have a REIT. The main reason for that being the UBTI issue for your ERISA. So if you can get past that hurdle, you have a significant portion of debt and it doesn't pass through UBTI, making them have to file a 990T. Hey, the REIT solves that. Part 2, you do a lot of out-of-state loans, and you have source income from more than 10 states.
Which is pretty common now.
Which is really common. Really common. So if you're more than 10, your options are you have the fund structure and you source all that income to all those states and you send out 10 K1s, or in some cases you're sending 30 plus K1s back to your investors. You got a fund tax return that's 1,200 pages plus because of all the K1s that are underlying. It's unreal. In those cases, the REIT still makes sense because it's more cost effective and less of a burden for your investor to have the REIT. Just continue forward.
I didn't think of it like that. I was always thinking about it from a political standpoint, like whether the thing would actually be repealed or not. But that's actually a even better point. There are scenarios where it does make sense regardless.
And I think it's case by case. We just got to look at the underlying and go, okay, where's the portfolio? Where are we sourcing income from? Or what's your investor base like? And what makes the most sense, right? What is the most effective and less burdensome on the investors? Let's go with that pathway. And at some point, to be honest with you, the 20% deduction is probably going to sunset some point in the future, right? That's our mindset.
It's set to end officially in 2025 under the current legislation. But
yes,
there's the reason why I bring it up for the uninitiated is people are worried that the Biden administration may try to repeal the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in its entirety. So yeah, there is that aspect, right? It's going to sunset.
It'll sunset. Who knows if it gets carried forward? I mean, there's always an outside chance that this thing carries forward, right? And it gets carved out. The 20% deduction for REIT income gets carved out from the QBI legislator that it sits underneath, right? And it becomes its own deal. Like, there's always the opportunity that it maybe never.
That is a good point. REIT rules change actually quite frequently.
Yes.
So, the recent safe harbors were installed, 4 years ago. So it's not impossible.
So I think there's always upside. And I think if you always have an exit strategy of, worst case scenario, it could go here. How do we get out of it and make sure that we're not locked in? Right. And that's why we've been such a huge proponent, and you yourself, of not making the main fund make the election, having a separate entity make the election, because that separate entity doesn't mean anything. Tomorrow you can close it, roll everything up, and just shut it down, and you're not a REIT anymore. You don't have to worry about it. It's just gone.
Right. And for our audience, I kind of want to give them a little bit of like, my perspective on it is also like, I agree with Jason 100%. That's actually a much more planning based approach. And from my perspective, from a political standpoint, I was always thinking like, well, we have to look at what really matters is the Senate. And we really have to look at how the Senate goes. If the Senate stays with the Republicans and it does end up that way, there's no way. This has to be done through legislation. It can't be done through executive order. So it'll have to be pushed through the Senate. It will not be pushed through the Senate. So there's that. And then there's also just the practicalities of looking at the platform that was put out by the Biden administration, which is basically stating that he wants to do some work on income tax, capital gains. There was never been a mention about the opportunity zones, no mention about the 20% QBI. It didn't look like it was a target of the administration. And I don't think that it would make sense if, considering that, op zones, they're kind of tied together, right? And op zones serve low-income communities. This thing can supports a lot of small businesses. It would be, in my personal opinion, it would be political suicide to do that, because it affects more small businesses than it does our industry. So, so going back to kind of the industry as a whole and Armanino's growth, and a lot of folks don't know, you guys have grown significantly over the past 4 years. You guys have added multiple offices. You have offices in Irvine now, offices in San Diego.
So over the past 4 years, we've added a Dallas office, Irvine, Seattle. Trying to think of the other offices that have popped up. We've expanded in LA, so we have 5 in LA. So, I mean, pretty big expansion. I was going to say that when I started at Armanino, when I first landed here, we were like 200 employees, and now we're at 1,400.
Wow.
So by CPA firm, who are usually your steady eddies, right?
Right.
Not that, charging forward and conquer the world, tech type growth. We've grown a lot, and we've morphed over the years, and we're a big company now.
And let's talk about that. How Armanino's kind of gearing up to serve the industry going forward, right? And you as well, Jason, specifically you in your practice. What's on the horizon for you guys going into 2021? You mentioned fund administration, I think. Is that one of the things?
As I mentioned before, we're expanding our current offerings, because historically we've been audit, tax, and some light advisory. Involved when needed. If you need a second set of eyes, we'd be there for the second set of eyes and an oversight, but not full administration where we're pushing the buttons. We've decided that in order to add more value to certain relationships, not all relationships, I think there are certain relationships where we are much better served to be the audit and the tax provider and continue down that pathway as we have historically. There are certain relationships where we would be much better partners with the fund manager and the fund itself as the fund administrator, and be the one delivering statements, looking at yields, waterfalls, whatever the fund structure is, if there's feeders or blockers or whatever else, right? If we were involved, it would probably be less prohibitive for some of our fund managers to go ahead and launch into some of those products. You start bringing in international money and it gets complex. It gets harder, right? Do you want to deal with that on your own, or do you want to have somebody in your back pocket that can deal with it on your behalf? Make sure that you don't trip and fall down. And we can marry up to whoever you need on the other side of the house in the audit firm, and be your concierge and deal with the auditors, because we are auditors, right? So I think for us as a firm, we're just trying to be deeper in our relationships, be more successful with the way that we partner, and provide the right solution no matter what it is.
That's fantastic. I mean, the add value approach is definitely, I mean, it's kind of lost in our space. I sometimes wonder, is like, where is it? Why is that? But the add value approach for a service provider is the most important thing. And we're always trying to add value in whatever form we can. Going into 2021, we're really excited to continue working with you guys. And, you and I will always be, working together. We've been, friends and colleagues for almost 10 years now. And, but I also kind of want to ask, like, what other, I mean, you're just in private lending now, right? There's nothing else.
I still have to support in some other industries through the rest of the year. But I'm less involved in the growth, key initiatives, value. So
you're focused on this industry for that.
I am focused on, really, it comes down to our real estate funds, REITs, and then the rollout of our fund administration. And fund administration is part of it's the real estate funds and the mortgage REITs that we deal with. Yeah. But the other part of it, like our fund administration arm, is going to swim towards private equity, right, and bigger firms like that. So it's not just specific to real estate.
So there'd be a different leads depending on the industry, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Yep. Well, that's going to be very interesting to see, because administration's always been a heavily asked thing for us, and we've always wanted to see more and more of it. So we thank you for bringing that service to our industry. And where I want to kind of close out with is kind of more Jason related, right? So we talked about your background and all that kind of fun stuff, and how you came up at Armanino. We're all locked down right now, but like, what's the first thing you want to do? You, Jason, what's the first thing you want to do once we can? I don't know when. I don't even know when it's going to be. Personally, what's the first thing you want to do when we can get out? When we can actually get out there? Because you have a lot of cool hobbies, by the way. So
I do have relatively cool hobbies. Depends on who you talk to. Some people think it's unsafe, but most people think it's pretty cool. So for those of you who don't know, I race stock cars as a hobby. It's a hobby that my dad and I do, and it's a great connection point for the two of us, right? Very much something that we enjoy doing together, and it's kept us well connected. As I grow older and my kids get older, and my dad and I really enjoy it. So I want to be able to do that more than we have been, because it's been very restrictive, especially in California. I mean, sporting events.
How does that work? They don't let you go out there, right? They're not doing any races.
They kind of do it under the cover. It's not big enough to like gain media attention, so they basically told you to stay off social media and not promote it the way that normally you would, just so nobody catches you. But they've kept it low key. So we've done a couple races, but not like we have historically. Right. But to be honest with you, I don't want to have to worry. Like I would love for us to turn the page on this thing and not question every move that you make, whether you should be doing it, shouldn't be doing it. Is it okay to do it? Am I going to put somebody else in jeopardy? Like me and my family, we just want to be able to go out and like do stuff as we did before, and we took for granted before. Just be able to go out and like see people and see our friends and travel. But my wife and I had this big old plans that like 2020, we're going to travel and go see stuff. And, instead of sinking a bunch of money into the house, we were going to, use that money to go have experiences with our daughters who are 5 and 8. That didn't go well.
That's a really good age to start too, right? When you go out and they're mature enough to be able to move around with you, and
maybe the later stages of 2021 that stuff comes back around.
Oh man,
start doing that stuff, but we'll see. You know what? At the end of the day, one day at a time. We're all in this together. Everyone's going through the same struggles, so keeping perspective on it and trying to keep the mind right about this isn't forever. It's for now. They're coming up with solutions in very short order. We'll get there.
Yeah. And for me, I guess in the theme of this, I'd like to, one of the things I want to do is really just get out, travel.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it has to be to go to it, even if it has to be for a work conference, go to Vegas.
Yep.
I just want to get out, man.
Took it for granted.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I mean, all those days were like, I could have kind of just spent an extra day and had fun at wherever I was. There's two brothers in the industry, the Tedesco brothers.
Yeah.
Whenever they go anywhere, they go see stuff, and they
experience.
They take the energy to go out there and enjoy the location they're at and see sights. And I was like, why didn't I should have done that, because we've had so many opportunities.
But at the time, it was so easy to say, I don't have time for that. I got to get back to my stuff.
I got to get back home. Yeah, exactly.
I got to get home, and I can't spend that extra day. But now you look back and you're like, yeah, I should have taken that day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a really good, way to close out the interview. And once again, Jason, thank you for joining us here today. And
thank you.
I hope the audience, gains a lot out of it. And if there's any needs they have, give you a call. Or if they want to get into stock cars, give you a call.
Absolutely. I'll give you all the rundown on stock cars.
Exactly. So hopefully we'll see you all soon, and hopefully we'll see you soon at a conference in a year or so, I guess.
Whew. A long time. Long time coming.
I know, man. All right. You take care. Thank you very much.